If you grew up in the 80s and 90s, you'll remember just how much hip-hop changed as we entered the 2000s. Rappers were getting more creative by the minute, with the release of critically acclaimed albums across the decade from Eminem, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, Kanye West, Lil Wayne. This, along with the birth of social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, meant more eyeballs were on hip-hop artists than ever before. The early 2000s also saw some world-class draftees enter the NBA, like LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, and James Harden. Major shoe brands like Nike and Adidas were quick to capitalize. But here's the thing, if you couldn't snap up a top NBA draft pick, who are you going to get to endorse your brand? Today, we're going to be taking a look at the sneakers that defined 2000s hip-hop. From the iconic G-Unit Reebok Deal to Hurricane Chris's short stint with Fila. You guys remember that one? Whether they were on the money or missed the mark, you just couldn't take your eyes away from the new, exciting cultural landscape that was taking shape in the early 2000s. With the insurgence of groundbreaking hip-hop, the sneaker deals came thick and fast. However, all this may have never happened if it wasn't for hip-hop pioneers Run DMC, who paved the way with an Adidas deal way back in 1986. The Rock and Roll Street Hall of Fame trio changed the game, taking sneakers from the basketball court to the stage. Sneakers were no longer seen as just functional. They would now carry a cultural capital. This deal transformed the world of sneakers for hip-hop. I mean, and just sneakers in general was massive. Because where once it was only athletes who could be chased by the big brands, it was now rappers who were seen as hot property. Run DMC was out there killing them with the lyrics, the hard beats, the videos, everything. And they were dressed head to toe in the most stylish of streetwear. Kangol bucket hats, Adidas tracksuits, and of course, the Adidas sneakers. They had their own unique style, often seen wearing their Adidas Superstars with the laces removed and the tongue pushed out. Rocking all this fly gear, they took the stage at Madison Square Garden in the summer of 1986, and they bashed out a crazy track that would land them the infamous sneaker deal. The track was none other than off their Raising Hell album. And it wasn't just performed in front of thousands of fans, but also in the company of Adidas executive Angelo Anastasio. And as chance would have it, during this historic performance, Run DMC asked the crowd to hold up their Adidas during the song, and they did. It is crazy. It's just like one of the craziest moments in sneaker and hip-hop history. From this, Run DMC would become the first non-athletes to sign with a major sportswear brand. A deal worth $1.6 million. The foundations were set. From this day on, brands would no longer simply look to athletes for endorsements. Rappers had joined the game. And then we enter the new millennium, with a refreshed hip-hop scene and brands vying to get their claws into the next big performers who could help catapult their street status to the next level. Reebok came out firing in the early 2000s, signing Jay-Z, 50 Cent, G-Unit, Nelly, Daddy Yankee, Timbaland, and Missy Elliott, all in the span of just 4 years. It took a little while for Jay-Z and Reebok to come to an agreement because, as you know now, Jay-Z is a savvy businessman. And Reebok initially just wanted to endorse him, but he wasn't about that. He was like, yo, I want a partnership. And that's exactly what he got. From this, the S.Carter line was created in 2003. The line was inspired by 80s Gucci design, commonly worn by hustlers in New York City, where Jay-Z grew up. Jay promoted the S.Carters in one of the coolest ways possible, sponsoring a team in the Rucker Playground Summer League. It was super successful at first, and it was Reebok's most sold sneaker in a long time in its first week of sales, but it later tanked after it was released to a wider market. Maybe it was the look of the sneaker that didn't really match the hype around it at the time, because it was really just, a white leather sneaker with a dark sole. The lateral side even kind of looked like an Adidas more than a Reebok, so maybe that's what it was, but unfortunately, it failed. There's a lot of nostalgia there for me. I love the S.Carters. I would definitely rock a pair today. As Reebok continued to fight with Nike over market share, Reebok CEO Paul Fireman turned to 50 Cent a year later. No one was more surprised than 50 Cent himself, as he would rap in his track Stunt 101, "Just can't believe Reebok did a deal with a psycho." However, nothing could be further from the truth, as he would promote the brand as much as possible, constantly wearing Reebok gear and even doing in-store appearances nationwide. He was 100% for Reebok.
I'm hot, man, I rock Reeboks, man. If it ain't the G-Unit, it's the S-Dot, man. S-Dot's taking off, G-Force pop the land. See how we cross brand, we boss about it, man.
50 would also look after his crew, allowing them to have their own sneakers on his line. And he even secured a $500,000 advance for Tony Yayo, who was in prison at the time. In an interview with Complex, Yayo stated that 50 Cent's business acumen was so on point that he randomly called a meeting with Lloyd Banks, Young Buck, Tony Yayo, and Mobb Deep.
It was just crazy. 50 was in a funny mood, because, you know, shout out to 50, but he gets crazy sometimes. So he came, called in the room, it's me, Banks, Buck, rest in peace Prodigy. Prodigy was there, Mobb Deep. He looked at the ground.
You didn't have on your shoes.
Nobody had on
Their shoes.
Damn.
Yep.
Banks had on Gucci. I had on Louis.
Yep.
Buck had on Fendi, whatever.
Right.
Mobb Deep, I don't know what they had on, but nobody had on their actual shoe. And he was like, deal's over, guys. No more checks from Reebok.
The early 2000s also saw hip-hop superstar Missy Elliott ink a deal with the Vector brand. I mean, Missy Elliott during that time was one of the most fashion-forward artists. You know, she was eccentric, super creative. You know, she was a perfect match for Reebok. And the deal would once again push Reebok to become a brand synonymous with hip-hop, as she released a song titled It's a Woman's World for their new campaign, as a play on James Brown's infamous classic It's a Man's World. Its aim was to address gender stereotypes, putting tennis star Venus Williams and basketball player Jennifer Azizi front and center in the music video. Enter the mid-2000s. Reebok ventured across the pond to sign Puerto Rican reggaeton star Daddy Yankee to a 5-year deal. His endorsement helped legitimize Reebok in the hip-hop community abroad, believe it or not. And it also helped introduce reggaeton to the US. It was a win for both Daddy Yankee and Reebok. He got his own sneaker that really moved away from the plain colors of the G-Units and S.Carters, and he would mix it up a little bit with colors and materials to get more creative with his releases, using camel print, blues, yellows, and reds that were all packaged in these silver boxes. He even worked with Reebok on this shoe that was gray and black that kind of looked like a soccer shoe, but unfortunately it was never released to the general public. Because we all know you guys are dying to cop some Daddy Yankee soccer shoes, so unfortunately never released to the public. Sorry guys. Also, if you're enjoying this video, why not give it a like? Reebok wasn't the only brand fighting for a piece of the hip-hop pie, as Lugs entered the race, signing rapper and Cash Money CEO Birdman to a deal in 2004. Reportedly worth millions, it made him one of the highest paid endorsers in the hip-hop industry at that time. Not that dissimilar to the S.Carters and the G-Units, Birdman's Lugs were fairly understated but had a Jordan 4 vibe to them, and I think that helped them, you know, because they would go on to sell millions of pairs every quarter when the deal was at its peak. You guys remember Lugs? Lugs were huge at my school during the 2000s. As companies continued to chase the next hot rapper, a relatively unknown brand, 310 Motoring, which was a sub-brand of Skechers, made their move. Wanting to compete with the bigger, more well-known brands like Nike and Reebok, 310 was able to sign the Game and Nas to sneaker deals, providing them with their own signature silhouettes. The Game's Hurricane matched the vibes of the G-Units, S.Carters, and the Birdmans, but as for Nas' Disciples, it looked like a brown orthopedic shoe you could purchase at a pharmacy. A questionable move from someone who is unarguably one of the greatest rappers of all time. He would later sign with Fila in 2008, but he didn't really have a signature shoe with them. He just promoted the brand and he would show up in commercials and stuff. Fila also signed rapper and Louisiana native Hurricane Chris to a deal in 2008. And you know what? This is considered one of the worst rapper and sneaker partnerships of all time. Hurricane's job was to be the face of the Hellsman shoe. Unfortunately, the sneaker didn't really take off as they hoped. I mean, it was literally a rip-off of Prada's America's Cup sneaker, which released way back in 1997. And if you put the two sneakers right next to each other, they look identical, but I mean, compare the patent leather and the mesh uppers, and you can see why this sneaker failed. Unfortunately, a year later, Hurricane Chris gets arrested and Fila pulls out of the deal. Meanwhile, with Nelly producing one of the most famous sneaker-based hip-hop tracks of all time with Air Force Ones in 2002, obviously, Nike signed them to a sneaker deal. I mean, he made that Nike anthem for them. It was massive.
During the partnership, they gave Nelly a Charles Barkley sneaker, the CB94 Nelly. Kinda weird.
Shockingly, he also had a short stint with Reebok during this era. They released a Nelly signature silhouette dubbed the Reebok Dirty One. I'm sure you've never heard of them before because, I mean, match them up against an Air Force One and these sneakers are laughable. They were a massive flop. Who had a pair? Kanye also had to get in on the rapper slash big shoe company giving rappers tons of money gold rush. Perhaps one of the most defining moments in sneaker culture, Ye would release 2 sneakers with Nike during his tenure. But here's the thing, they're 2 of the most memorable releases of all time. The Nike Air Yeezy 1 and the Nike Air Yeezy 2. both still highly sought after. However, the relationship went sour because Kanye felt like they weren't giving him full creative control. He wanted to use like some of the Jordan brand elements in his designs, and apparently they weren't giving him royalties, and he was really unhappy with Nike. So he moved on to Adidas in 2013, and we all know how that's going at the moment. Another random collaboration from this era was the partnership between Pony and Snoop Dogg. He had his own line of sneakers called Doggy Biscuits, which apparently Snoop Dogg met with a design team, and he even came up with that name, Doggy Biscuits. The world famous rapper went into detail with the toe box too, adding a perforated Snoop silhouette that could be popped out, and he also added bandana art to the sock liner, outsole, and tissue paper. I mean, it was clear he was heavily involved in the design process because he loves bandana and putting that on designs. Okay, probably the partnership I have the most nostalgia for is the Dame Dash and Pro Keds deal. He had this grand plan to revitalize Pro Keds by targeting a younger hip hop audience with his Pro Keds by Dame Dash line. This included a new line of sneakers and apparel that saw some success, but I don't know, I remember seeing these everywhere in high school, and my brother had some. We had like these scratch and sniff Pro Keds, we had the cookies and cream Pro Keds. Actually, I don't even think it had very much success. I think it was a pretty short-lived thing, and he lost the licensing agreements, a few years later, and that was that. Switching from actual hip-hop to hip-hop personas, there was of course the Allen Iverson deal. He signed with Reebok in 1996 after he joined the 76ers, going first in the NBA draft that year. His initial deal with Reebok was $50 million for 10 years, but halfway through the deal, Reebok renegotiated with him, and he would then receive $800,000 per year for the rest of his life. On top of this, when he turns 55 in the year 2030, which isn't that far away, he'll receive a lump sum of $32 million. So there's rumors that, during this era, Allen Iverson's lifestyle was crazy. Like, he would travel with these giant entourages to his away games and spend obscene amounts of money on jewelry, cars, houses, and vacations for him and his crew. After, leaving the NBA, he signed with the Turkish basketball team, which is pretty indicative that he was broke. You guys think that Reebok deal saved him from going completely broke? But one thing for sure, when you think Reebok, you still think Allen Iverson. It wasn't just the official collaborations that married the sneaker and hip-hop worlds together. Since Run DMC first released My Adidas in 1986, rappers started writing lyrics shouting out their favorite sneakers and brands. Like when KRS-One pledging his allegiance to the swoosh in 1987, rapping, "I only wear Nikes, not Adidas or Reeboks," and Big L spitting that he was keeping rappers' hearts pumping like Reeboks in his opening line of Put It On. The Beastie Boys, Kool G Rap, and Rakim had Adidas back, while Nas, Nelly, and Master P shouted out Nike on multiple occasions. Like Sir Isaac Newton once said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." And in this case, this quote definitely rings true for 80s hip-hop giants Run DMC and their groundbreaking Adidas deal. I'm looking forward to seeing what's still to come. I mean, hip-hop is at an all-time high. Sneakers are at an all-time high. I mean, I don't know. What's next? What's next for hip-hop and sneakers? I'm curious to know. Go watch another video on my channel. I'll see you guys in one of those videos. Go ahead and I'll link one at the end of this and you can check it out. See you in that video.